With only days to go before the presidential election, and now major things are happening when it comes to the integrity of the vote. We're breaking it all down. I'm Ben Swann. This is Truth in Media. In just 24 hours, there have been major things happening when it comes to election fraud and accurate vote counts. Here's what's happened so far. In Pennsylvania, Trump just won a lawsuit because voting lines were being shut down early for days. Well, now a judge has granted an injunction and stated that those early voting sites in those counties will stay open for another 3 days. It is a huge win for voters. In Virginia, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the state against the DOJ. SCOTUS saying that, in fact, Virginia can absolutely remove self-identified non-citizens from the voter rolls. Again, another huge win for that state. And in Michigan, we've got reports of thousands of duplicate ballots. Just one ID reportedly cast votes up to 29 times. The Trump campaign was able to address it with the Michigan Secretary of State, and all of those duplicate votes have been removed. And let's not forget about in Colorado, where passwords for voting machines were leaked, exposing sensitive information. Well, meanwhile, for the most part, the campaigning is done, but not quite.
I strongly disagree with any criticism of people based on who they vote for.
Rather than focusing on her closing message, Vice President Kamala Harris is doing damage control after President Biden called Trump supporters garbage.
250 million people are not garbage.
And what does the Trump campaign do? Well, they turned that PR blunder into a viral moment, rolling into Wisconsin in this garbage truck. Not sure who's running Trump's campaign on this end of it, but they have done a masterful job of creating viral moments.
How do you like my garbage truck? This truck is in honor of Kamala and Joe Biden.
It's clever, it's relatable, it's precisely what the Harris campaign does not need right now. But here's the deal. With Election Day just around the corner, there seem to be some very serious issues, as we mentioned, taking place. If you dare to question any of it, voting integrity, election integrity, you get labeled a conspiracy theorist. But the reality is this: people are speaking up more than ever, and that's because they see the need for change. So where does the Trump campaign seem to be doing the right thing as opposed to the last time around? Well, when it comes to voting problems, they're not being reactionary like we saw in the last presidential election. They're being proactive. They're going after fraud and going after voting issues the moment they raise their heads. So while we might all laugh at the political theatrics, let's not lose sight of the very serious issues at play that are threatening your vote today. Joining me now to discuss is the mayor of Knox County, Tennessee, none other than Glenn Jacobs. Glenn, good to see you.
Thanks for having me on, Ben.
So let's talk about what's been happening around the country. Obviously, as we mentioned, we've seen kind of voting issues in Michigan. We've seen things happening in Pennsylvania. Last time, after the election took place, there were all these lawsuits that were raised, and then the Trump campaign was told, well, you don't have standing. This time, they seem to be going after these issues the moment they raise their heads. What say you?
Yeah, I think they're doing a much better job overall at the campaign. President Trump has been much more disciplined this time than he has been in the past. As you mentioned, the viral moments they've created, there are images coming out of this campaign which are going to live on for generations. One of them being him in the garbage truck. So I think they've done a very good job of getting ahead of any potential issues that they might have.
Yeah, absolutely. You might say in Trump's case, they're running a big red machine, right?
Sure looks like it.
But here's the reality, right? The reality is that we're seeing, it seems like all of the momentum, all of the energy is behind Trump right now, from, again, getting every kind of viral moment right, the McDonald's thing, the trash deal yesterday. We're seeing all of that behind him. And then what we're seeing in terms of the voter turnout is just, it's bananas right now. In Pennsylvania, the lines are 2, 3, 4 hours long for Republicans to early vote. We've never seen that kind of response so far. What are you seeing where you are, and how do you see this thing shaking out in a couple of days?
In general, Republicans wait to the day of to vote. I think this year around the country is seeing a lot more early voting, and that's something that President Trump has been pushing. Here in Tennessee, we have a 2-week early voting period. It actually ends today. Our early voting is, I think, a little down from 2020, but it's more down among Democrats than it is among Republicans. So it does show that this time Republicans are showing up early to vote, and that's really important if you think about it, because you could have something on Election Day, and probably not this year, but you've seen in the past where you have snowstorms or whatever, people are planning on going on voting Election Day, and then they can't get there. So that's something that's been a theme of the Trump campaign, is to get out and vote early to make sure that your vote is counted. Make sure you get there.
Yep. Yeah, the last thing I'd say is, with the Harris campaign, you mentioned that Democrats are down in early voting in a lot of places. In Tennessee, we know that's the case in North Carolina. There seems to be definitely an enthusiasm gap.
Yes,
Last thing I want to ask you about, there are these ads that are running right now. Julia Roberts, George Clooney doing these ads. Quite frankly, they're almost laughable, right? The ad is essentially saying, hey, if you're a woman voter, don't tell your husband. You can secretly vote for Kamala. It's okay. And it's so interesting because Trump is the candidate that people have disavowed or didn't want to admit they were voting for. Who's afraid to vote for Kamala Harris? And if that is now the tactic, in days before the election, you're saying, hey, it's okay if you secretly vote for her. You don't have to tell anyone. I think that speaks louder to the enthusiasm gap than anything else. I'll give you the final word.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's a huge enthusiasm gap, and you can see it with the signs. You can just see it with everything. You can see it with the people, the amount of people at the rallies, all those things. I mean, people are jazzed about President Trump. And I think by this point in the campaign, Vice President Harris has kind of thrown everything against the wall as far as they started with joy and this and that. And finally, it's all come down to, I'm not Donald Trump, is what she's running on. But as far as any policies of her own, she hasn't been able to articulate those. So I think that they have done a horrible job, obviously, because she's not a great candidate. And I also think that the Trump team has done a wonderful job of getting him out there and getting him out there in ways which aren't just political, but really showing the people the man behind the persona on TV. I think it's been brilliant.
Absolutely. Glenn Jacobs, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks.
And that is our show. You can catch all of our latest coverage on the race. Check us out on X at @truth_in_media. And you can watch all of our full episodes right now at truthinmedia.com.